Hello the internet, my name's Laura and welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to start a new kind of series here on my channel, which I have named Grow a Green Thumb. Mostly because I was the type of person that for a really long time didn't think that I could keep plants alive. There were certain ones that just kind of lived no matter what I did, and then anything else that I actually tried to take care of, I would end up killing. That might sound familiar to some of you. And so when I started this channel, part of my starting this channel is being more intentional about taking care of my plants. And as I watched more of these YouTube videos and took care of my plants more, I realized that there are a couple of myths around taking care of plants. And the biggest one of those is that some people are just born with a green thumb. I'm sure you've heard that, oh, so-and-so has a green thumb, they can just take care of plants and their plants are wonderful and amazing, and when I tried, I have a black thumb and everything that I touch dies, right? You've heard that before. You may have said that before. And what I've come to realize is that that is just absolute bunk. It's not true that some people are born with green thumbs and some people are born with black thumbs. What it really is that people who know how to keep plants alive do so because they have skill in keeping plants alive. They have experience, they have probably some dead plants as well, and they have learned what it takes to keep certain plants alive. And people who are black thumbs don't have those skills yet. It's not that you're bad at taking plants, it's just that you don't know how yet. It's like if you sat down in front of a chessboard and you didn't know the rules and then you played chess, you're not going to be successful because you don't know how the pieces work, you don't know how the game works, you don't, this one moves this way, this one moves that way, they have different needs, for how they move around the board, right? That's the thing that I really wanted to build this series around, is people thinking that they can't take care of plants when really all it is they just don't have the skills that they need yet. They don't have the knowledge. And what I want to be able to do is I want you to be able to build those skills up by taking tiny little bites of knowledge and then building on top and learning something else and learning something else, right? And the second myth that I kind of want to just debunk right off the bat is that some people say that there's some plants that are easy to take care of. Succulents, Sansevieria, ZZ plants. There's a whole bunch of them. I could go off a list of plants where people say they're easy to take care of. That is absolutely not true, because when people say that a plant is easy to take care of, basically what they're saying is that plant doesn't need a lot of care. So when they're saying succulents are easy plants, that's because succulents, you basically are supposed to take them, put them in your windowsill, and then forget about them for months. And that's what easy is, because you don't have to do anything. But people who want to get into plants, in general, want to do something. You want to be able to water it, you want to be able to care for it, you want to watch it grow, you want to watch, all that kind of stuff, right? And so, when they say that it's an easy plant, you still have to know what that plant wants. Succulents don't want to be watered. And that's why they're easy. Sansevierias do not need a lot of water. I have a huge Sansevieria. I received it as a gift. And I have it upstairs. It's in a nice place, it gets some light. I went 2 months without watering it because it doesn't need to be watered all that much, right? And then I was like, well, it's been 2 months, I should probably water it. And so I watered it, and 3 or 4 leaves just went yellow because I had overwatered it. I hadn't watered the plant in 2 months. And I even kind of actually know what I'm doing, but that's the thing, right? You need to understand what a particular plant wants, what a particular plant needs, And once you build up that knowledge, and you'll be able to turn that knowledge into skill where you can say, I've seen this in a different plant. Let me try this with this other plant, right? And then you can kind of extrapolate, right? But yeah. So for the very, very basics, you might have seen in this video that I'm going to be talking about soil, water, and light. Soil, water, and light, all plants, not all plants, but for the very, very basics, the 101 course, soil, water, light, all plants need these things. Okay, so we're going to start with soil. So if you buy a plant from a store, more than likely, it is going to come with soil. See there's soil down in there, right? Because plants like to be in soil. Depending on where you get your plant from, you're either going to have good soil or bad soil. I know this is really... Nurseries tend to have, like if you go to an actual nursery, you're going to probably get pretty decent soil. The soil is going to be the type that that particular plant wants. If you get your plant from Home Depot or Lowe's or like a big box store, there is any chance that you're going to get a plant with poor soil because they don't really know and the place that they got it from might not really care. So the most important thing that soil does is, well, number one, it can hold the plant up, which is kind of important. It looks nice when it's standing up. But the other things that it does is it transfers water to the roots and also some nutrients. So if your soil is not doing one of those two things, then the plant is not going to do well. I got a particular plant from a Lowe's one time. It was a succulent, and I brought it home, and it was very cute, and I liked it because it was fuzzy. And I put it under my grow lights, and it was, fine, and it was doing good. And then one day I noticed the leaves were a little floppy, and I was like, oh, okay, this plant needs some water. So I watered the plant. Easy. Leaves are floppy, need water, water the plant. And then, I waited, I didn't pay attention to it for a couple of days because, And then I went back and I'm like, these leaves are still floppy. This is a succulent. It shouldn't need water like super often, right? And I'm like, why is it? I was like, okay, well, maybe it just needed a little bit more water. So I gave it a little more water and I left it. I probably left it for longer this time. And then I came back and I was like, this plant is still not happy. It's still not, the succulent leaves are not getting plump like they're full of water like succulent leaves should be. And so I was like, okay, maybe it's some reason not getting good water. So I pulled it out. The soil all was very dry. I pulled it out of the pot. The soil was all very dry. And I'm like, okay, it definitely didn't get water. And so I put water into a container and I stuck the little plug without the container. And I stuck the little plug of plant soil into that thing of water. And I left it and I went around and did some stuff. And I came back a half an hour later and the soil was still dry. It had been sitting directly in water and the soil was still dry. And I was like, oh, okay, apparently this soil is just crap. Pardon my French. Apparently the soil is just no good. And so that's why the plant isn't getting any water, because the soil itself is not absorbing water and so it can't get to the roots, right? So I took that plant and I took all the soil away from the roots as gently as I could. And then I put it in some new soil. And then I watered it. And then the little leaves plumped up. And that plant has been doing great ever since. That plant has turned into this plant. But this plant had to have soil that was going to allow the water to get into the leaves so that it turned into this nice plant, right? So for the very basics, more than likely, in 99% of cases when I get a plant from either a big box store or a nursery, it is in soil that is going to be fine. For right now, because we are in the 101 course, you don't want to mess with the soil. All right? I'm just going to say that. I'm going to give you permission to not mess with the soil. You don't want to mess with what a plant is in currently, pot size, soil, whatever, unless you are having a problem. I was having a problem with that plant because it very obviously was not getting water, and so that's why I messed with that soil. But for the most part, you're going to want to leave your plant in whatever soil it comes in. And then if you have issues, we're going to talk about, because this is still the 101 course, we're going to talk about bagged potting mix, right? There's a lot of bagged potting mix out there. Some of them are better than others. More than likely, the soil that you're going to be able to find the most easy is Miracle-Gro. There are people who love Miracle-Gro, there are people who hate Miracle-Gro. My experience with Miracle-Gro is that it has a good amount of fertilizer in it. The plants do well based on the fertilizer that's just in the soil. They've got a lot of different types. They've got like moisture control, they've got potting mix, they've got cactus, they've got orchid bark, they've got perlite, which, they've got all the different types that you might possibly need. So here is me giving you permission, because we are still in 101, buy whatever potting mix you can find and just use it straight out of the bag. It's going to be good enough, right? Because we're still learning, right? We're at the bottom. We don't need to try and be up here. I am going to put out videos later where I talk about like mixing your own soil and all that kind of stuff. But for right now, mess with pre-bagged potting mix. And obviously, if you have a tropical plant, you're going to want to just get a regular potting mix. If you've got a succulent of some variety, you're going to want to get the succulent mix. If you've got an orchid of some variety, you're going to want to get the orchid mix. Like 101 can be that complicated. All right? So for right now, go ahead, use regular potting soil. I still have bags. Do you want to see my bags of potting soil? Okay, see, I use Miracle-Gro potting mix. I have good plants. You may have seen some of my other videos. If you haven't seen my other videos, you can look at my other videos. My plants are in pretty good shape. Miracle-Gro. I don't want you to feel guilty because you're using what some people might consider low quality soil. Now, you can, of course, go out there and, what are some brands? Black Gold, I've heard, is pretty good. I think it's called Foxglove Farms. There are other potting mixes that are going to be more expensive. They're going to be more fancy. They've got other things in them. I'm not saying don't use those. I'm just saying don't discount the Miracle-Gro while you're at the beginning of your journey. Okay, so that is going to be pretty much, that's the 101 course for soil, right? Don't mess with your soil unless you're actually having a problem. And use whatever bag potting mix that you can afford. I mean, don't break the bank. Use whatever potting mix you want to. If you want to go for the more expensive stuff, go for the more expensive stuff. If you want to just use whatever you can find, use whatever you can find, okay? Good. Okay, so that is basically soil. We are now going to go into water. You have water. Your plants like water. You take the water out of your faucet, you put it into your little watering can, you pour water onto your soil, and then your plant takes a drink. Okay, so, I know, I'm really not making fun. I want to make sure that people, understand. As with any of these topics that I'm going over, this can be ridiculously simple. It can be as simple as, and you take water and you pour it on the plant and then it takes a drink. And it can be ridiculously advanced, right? Way up here, right? Because there are different plants that have different requirements for water. And we're not going to talk about those right now. We're going to talk about the type of plants that you normally get from a big box store or basic plants from a nursery. The plants that are called easy. Most of them are fine with, you take the water, you pour the water in. What I am going to talk about, still in the 101 level, is how you decide how much water your plant will need. Because that's still fairly basic, right? So the main thing that you want to look at when you're trying to decide how much water your plant wants are two things. You're going to look at the stem and you're going to look at the leaf. Technically, you could also look at the roots, but that requires, pulling it out of the pot and maybe looking at it. You don't necessarily need to mess with the roots. You can, but you don't need to. Leaves, stem. So succulents, the main thing about succulents is that their leaves are very fleshy. So, if you've ever poked a succulent in a store, for the most part, their leaves are thick. They're kind of spongy if you push on them, right? And that is because the plant leaves are actually holding water in them. If a plant the thicker a plant's leaves are, the less water it's going to need. As a general rule of thumb, the thicker a plant's leaves are, the less water it's going to need. The exact same thing holds true for really thick stems. So see, that stem is pretty thick on that plant. Just in general, the stem on this plant is pretty thick. These leaves are not as fleshy as a succulent, but they're pretty hard. Like, I don't really want to bend them very far because they're fairly solid feeling. This is a peperomia. Peperomias are kind of like a step above succulents. They tend to not need a lot of water. So they do pretty well because they store the water in the stem, they store the water in the leaves. Then we have plants, like this is an alocasia. The stems are fairly thick, but mostly it's a stem that's a proper size to support the leaf. And then the leaf itself is very papery, it's very thin. So this is the type of plant that would need a bit more water. It's going to need water more often than obviously a succulent or a peperomia. So if you've got a leaf where you feel it and it feels like paper and it's really kind of, just kind of floppy, then that's the type of plant that's going to need to be watered more often. So alocasias are like that. This is a eyelash begonia. Again, the leaves are papery. The stem is not really that thick. It's just kind of an appropriate size for how big the plant is, and also needs to be watered pretty often, right? Obviously, if you know what your plant is, you can look up care tips, and they're, all over the place. If you know what the plant is, or even if you know what species of plant is, I know that it's a peperomia, I know that it's a begonia. Even if you don't know what specific species it is, you can find care tips for, peperomia don't like a lot of water, let them dry out. Begonias would like to always be at least moist, only let a little bit, only the top part of the soil dry out before you water it. Okay? If you don't know in specific what type of plant is, like somebody gives you a gift or it's not labeled at all and you really just have no clue, you can either try and find out online. There's some really helpful Facebook groups and stuff like that where you can go and people will be like, this is what the plant is. I think there's even an app out there where you can take a picture of the plant and it will identify the plant for you. I haven't tried that myself, but that's also an option for finding out. Because that's the thing, right? If you don't know what the plant needs, you can't give the plant what it needs. It's basically as simple as that. So I'm giving you some ways that you can figure it out yourself. And I'm also giving you ways that you can find out, so that you can figure out what the plant needs and give it what it needs. All right, so that's going to be our 101 water. Like I said, yes, I know there's lots of other things that can be, done with water and different ways to water and all that kind of stuff. But I'm still going to throw those in a 102 video because right now I'm trying to give the bare minimum, everything. I will say at this point that one of the most common causes of plant death in beginners is overwatering. It's possible also more knowledgeable plant, but in beginners the most common problem is overwatering. Because you want to love your plant. Like, I understand this thing. It's like, it's a plant, I'm caring for it, I want to do things for it. But unfortunately, plants they're just slow, they don't do anything very fast. And so you're just not going to be watering them very often. It's just, don't water them too often. That was the thing that generally had me kill the most plants. I had trouble with succulents at the very beginning too, and most of it was because I just overwatered them, and then the roots rotted and they died. Sad. It is also possible to underwater, which is just the other end of the spectrum. People tend to either be overwaterers or underwaterers, just based on the type of people they are, right? Like, some people are like, oh, I want to care for the plant. Oh, I always want to care for the plant. It's there. I need to care for it. And then others are like, I put it down and then I forget that it's there, and I come back a month later and it's very possibly crispy. So the other thing that you're going to want to discover is which one of these you are. I kind of flip back and forth between the two. There's sometimes when I need the emotional support, I guess, of taking care of the plants and feeling like I'm doing something. And then there's times when I get busy with life and I have to remind myself to come down here and water the plants that need to be watered, need to be kept more moist. So figure out which one of those you are, and you're just going to have to work with it, right? But the most important thing to know is what your plant needs, and then you're going to have to model your life around that to a certain extent, because the plant's going to die if you don't take care of it the way that you need to, right? Okay. All right. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is light. I don't want to say that light is the least important, because it's definitely very, very important. But it's a little more complicated even at the basic level, right? It's a little more complicated because different windows in your house are going to have different light levels at different times of the day for different periods during different seasons. The sun is not a thing that can be controlled. And if you happen to have great light in your house, then that's great. There are also those of us like me, ignoring the light that is coming through the window up here. I do not have amazing light in my house. None of my windows are particularly great for catching light. I kind of do the best that I can with what I've got. And that's why I have a lot of grow lights, which we're going to touch on because some of you are going to need that even at a 101 level, right? Like I said, this is the most basic, and it's even then fairly complicated. I'm going to assume, based on where you live, you're going to get different amounts of light at different types of light, and light coming from different directions. I live in America. I live on the East Coast. So for the most part, southern windows are the ones that are going to get the most light. East and west windows are going to get white light at different times of the day as the sun goes across the sky. Northern windows are going to get the least amount of light. That may or may not be different in your place. It also depends on tree cover, if you have any balconies, if you have any other houses or apartment buildings or whatever, like outside your window so that it blocks the rays of light coming in. These are all things you're going to have to take account of for yourself. It's also not super easy to tell when a plant isn't getting enough light, because generally what happens is there's two things that'll happen when a plant isn't getting enough light. One is that it will get very stretched. Like it won't have like a nice compact form. It will start like stretching toward the light. Like wherever the light is, the plant will go in that direction. And that's not the same as it turning toward the light. But when it actually starts getting super stretched out, that's when you know that your plant is not getting enough light. So the stretching is rather obvious. The second thing that could happen when a plant is not getting enough light is basically it just doesn't grow very fast. There's not really a lot that you can do unless you know how fast the plant normally grows. Sometimes the only way you can figure that out is to move it to different locations, and then you'll find a spot where the plant just seems to be doing really well. Obviously, if the plant is growing faster because it's getting more light, it sometimes also needs more water, so just be aware of that. Most plants, large number of plants, like what is called bright indirect light. That basically means is that they want as much sun as they can get, but they do not ever want the sun directly touching their leaves, because plants can get sunburn the same way that people do. If they have too much sun on their leaves and that's not what the plant wants, the leaves will turn, they'll get yellow, brown, they might even turn crispy, and the leaf never recovers from that. Like, you know, we eventually heal sunburn, sunburn. Plants won't. Once a leaf is damaged from the sun, you just kind of have to wait for more leaves to grow in. So for the most part, if you're going to put your plants in the windows, you want to know what type of light they need. An important point is that succulents, because a lot of people are like, oh, they just want as much sun as they can get, blah, blah, blah. Succulents do not like direct light. This is a thing that I had a huge problem with at the beginning, because like most people, I thought succulents, they like light. I should just put them in as much sun as they want. And then the plant turns yellow, it turns brown, the leaves get all yucky. And if you're putting your plants in a south-facing window where it's going to be getting sun most of the day, you might want to have some sort of a curtain. You might want to have the plant back from the window a bit so that it's not... The plant can have some sun on its light leaves, but it just depends on it not having too much. And unfortunately, that's just one of those things that you're going to have to eventually learn, is how much sun is too much. And if you've got them in a west or an east-facing window, where the sun is only going to be directly on them for part of the day, it's probably more likely that it's okay that they can take some of that direct sun. Then when it's on the other side of your house, it's not being directly on the leaves, and then they'll be okay. I have most of my succulents on a western-facing porch, like a covered porch. They get very, very direct light for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon. And most of them don't have a problem with that. But that's because they're only getting that direct light for a limited amount of time. If you've got your plants in a north-facing window, very possible that you're not going to have any problem with direct sun on the leaves, but there might not be enough light coming through the northern-facing windows. If you are in the type of house like I am, where you don't have great light, that's when grow lights come in. And it's very easy to do things like you don't actually have to have a setup like this. If you're just starting out, you can get bulbs, like regular bulbs that just go into your lamps, that are daylight bulbs. Those give off the right kind of light for your plant. It's obviously not as good as the sun. You might still get some stretching and whatever like that, but if you're just starting out, you can get some daylight bulbs and have them in your regular fixtures, and that's going to help you out a lot. I also have many of my grow lights are not grow lights at all, but are shop lights that I got from Home Depot. And again, they're not as good as grow lights, but they do what I need them to do in order to keep my plants alive. For the people who don't have light in their windows that will work, daylight bulbs, you know, you want full spectrum light bulbs, and you can find that, like, it'll say it on the packaging, it'll say it, like, you know, whatever. You want full spectrum, because that's going to give your plants the wavelengths of light that they need. Of light that they need in order to grow and produce the food that they need and all that kind of good stuff. So we've gone over some of the mentality around being a plant parent. It would be really great if you're the type of person who often goes around saying, oh, well, I can't keep this plant alive because I'm not a green thumb and all this kind of stuff. I would encourage you to stop saying that, because you're basically reinforcing that you don't know anything about plants. And now that you've watched this video, you know the most basic thing about plants at this point. What I want you to start saying is, I am learning how to take care of my plants. Because that's basically what this is. Everybody who takes care of plants is continually learning, getting better, figuring out how things work in their space, in their area. And so there's a thought that I'd like to leave you with, is that good decisions come from experience, but experience comes from bad decisions. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna kill plants. I've killed plants. Any YouTuber you've ever watched has killed plants. Any of those amazing green thumbs that you know of that, you know, you're jealous of or whatever, they have killed plants. They've killed lots of plants. And so the most important thing is that, you know, just if you enjoy taking care of plants, then, you know, go out there and learn. Watch YouTube videos, read articles, you know, get plants and mess around with them and see what happens. Because that's the only way you're going to learn, right? Talk to nursery people. If you go to an actual nursery as opposed to a big box store, they're like almost always super willing to help you with whatever plants you need. They can recommend plants that are going to be easier for you to take care of in the beginning, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. They'll help you out with all that kind of thing, right? But the most important thing is to just see it as an experience, see it as a learning process, because that's what it is, right? And then that makes it all the sweeter when you actually get that plant that you've taken care of and it's gotten bigger and it's doing well and it's great, and you can look at it and be like, I helped that happen. Like, my care and my knowledge and my everything helped that happen, right? Okay, so if you like this video, please like this video. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments. I'm still working out what all I want to do with this series. And I'd be interested to know which things you guys are most interested in. Definitely we're going to be going to the 101 courses on soil, water, and light. Probably grow lights, and I've got a whole list of other, you know, things that are slightly more advanced topics. Fertilizer, obviously, and that kind of thing where it's just, you know, slightly more advanced. I mean, slightly more advanced. But, you know, let me know what you guys would like to see, and that way I can plan, like, which videos I'm going to put out first and all that kind of stuff. If you're not subscribed yet and you'd like to stick around and see more of these videos, please go ahead and subscribe. Even watching some of my other videos where they're not specifically on taking care of plants, you're still going to pick up stuff. Just because I throw out tidbits about, oh, this is working, this isn't working, just in, you know, everyday taking care of my plants. I really appreciate you watching this video and spending some time with me, and I really hope that it is giving you a new outlook on how you take care of your plants, on how you're going to proceed from here. Maybe it's just giving you a little bit of information. You know, either way, I hope that it has been useful for you. And I will see you guys in the next video. All right, bye-bye.